Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and continuing on, of course, with the Mission Impossible review marathon. So yes, that's right, now we come to the third installment from 2006, Mission Impossible 3. Yes, so the third installment in the Mission Impossible franchise/saga. Well, because despite the fact that the first sequel/second installment of Mission Impossible was a mixed bag and such, and in my opinion, and because, for those of you that have seen my review, or for those of you that haven't, go watch it, I didn't think it was that bad. I liked it, and, gave it a 7 out of 10. But, yes. But when it came to Mission Impossible 3, oh yeah, it turned out to be really good, definitely. And not to mention, this would be the directorial debut, this being his first feature film that he would direct, good old J.J. Abrams, yes. And J.J. Abrams, whom, before doing the third installment of Mission Impossible, he was best known for his work on television, most notably with Alias. If I might be mispronouncing that right or wrong, the show with Jennifer Gardner on ABC, and another show on ABC, which being Lost. Well, despite the fact that someone else who was originally considered to direct the third installment, which being Joe Carnahan, if I'm even pronouncing his last name right, again, you know me sometimes, unfortunately, he departed, and, Abrams was signed on to direct the third installment, and this began in 2004, but unfortunately, the third installment had to be delayed because, Abrams, he was currently busy with the two shows on ABC that I just mentioned, and not to mention, Tom Cruise had signed on with Spielberg to do the War of the Worlds remake, and it wasn't until after Abrams and Cruise, they were done with that stuff, and Abrams was able to, not be that busy with those two shows, and focus on working/directing on the third installment, and thus, after Cruise, having starred in War of the Worlds, now jumping on board for the third installment. And not to mention that the third Mission Impossible film is the first one where we have Alex Kurtzman and the late Roberto Orci as writers, and not to mention that even though that J.J. Abrams directed this, his company, Bad Robot, was not involved in the third installment. Not until the next two installments. So that's when Bad Robot was involved. What Abrams, Kurtzman, Orci, and Cruise, and the entire cast and crew, what they brought to the third installment was fantastic. It really was. And I've, of course, had seen this before, and it had been a long time since I had seen this, but until now, with the Mission Impossible review marathon, the opportunity to rewatch this, and I, of course, knew that this was a great Mission Impossible film, and I knew that even when, the first time I watched it, but having rewatched it, oh yeah, because I had completely forgotten how great this was, and I'd say, definitely the third installment would have to be in my top favorite Mission Impossible films, right next to a couple of others, So, just everything from beginning to end, what the story has to offer, with some familiar faces returning, most notably Ethan and Luther, with new IMF faces that step in, and a new addition to the family, and who would go on to be a part of the franchise. I think you know who it is. A member of IMF, and who would become, one of the main team members of Ethan and Luther, but I'm not going to say his name yet until I get to him. The main antagonists for this movie, the key locations, the action, the suspense, Michael Giacchino's music and score, Abrams' direction, overall, this was a great Mission Impossible film, and again, despite that, the first sequel / the second installment, yeah, the third one, you know, started to get the franchise back up on its feet and on the right track, you know. But yeah, just overall, the third installment of Mission Impossible 3, it's fantastic. A really good Mission Impossible film in the franchise. Wouldn't you say so? Alright, so, as always, for me, now that I finished with the first things I've had to say, my thoughts, etc., read the description / the story. Retired from active duty and training recruits for the Impossible Mission Force, Agent Ethan Hunt faces the toughest foe of his career, Owen Davian, an international broker of arms and information who is as cunning as he is ruthless. Davian emerges to threaten Hunt and all that he holds dear, including the woman Hunt loves. Alright, so, with that out of the way, reading the description / the story, another, background, actually a few other things I want to mention, fun facts and on background, because, first off, yeah, because the whole thing on, and as I read in the description / the story, the woman that Ethan loves, well, not being, Thaddeus Newton's character, unfortunately, yeah. Thandui Newton, who, you know, we previously saw in the second installment. She was offered a chance to reprise her role as Naya, but she turned it down because she wanted to spend more time with her family, and thus, later on, her role was changed to a new character named Lee Quint, yeah, and she would have been played by Carrie Ann Moss. But when J.J. Abrams stepped in as the director, the character that would have been played by Carrie Ann Moss, could you imagine if we had Carrie Ann Moss in the Mission Impossible franchise? I'm sure she would have been good. Anybody would have been good, you know, anybody would in the franchise. But point being is that, yeah, when Abrams stepped in, the character that Carrie would have played was replaced and scrapped entirely to a new female character that, yeah, Ethan would fall in love with and eventually marry in the third film. Oh boy, yeah. Well, you know, besides, I guess we can assume that, the fact that the timeline of the third film, obviously, having take place a couple of years after the events of the second film, more than likely, because, yeah, I guess, yeah, things sadly didn't work out for both Ethan and Naya, and then somewhere down the road, Ethan found someone new in his life, which, yeah, Julia, that's her name, but until I talk more about her once I get into the film. Also, apparently, because I feel like mentioning this, one other thing before I get into the film, because, yeah, apparently Tom Cruise, he allegedly threatened to cancel publicity for the film if Comedy Central rebroadcasted an episode of South Park that technically has him in it. If anybody happens to know this, I don't know, I just find that very interesting. I mean, look, I guess, yeah, more than likely Tom Cruise cannot get into the comedy of South Park, and yeah, and how, because they've made fun of Tom Cruise. I mean, can't we once in a while, you know, get a laugh of each other and such, you know, just, you know, can't we take a joke? Just, alright, anyways, but yeah, I just thought I'd mention that. Alright, anyways. Okay, so, getting into the film itself, and boy, do we start off on we're off to a good start, because, well, we see Ethan, once again, Tom Cruise, in a situation where, yeah, he is being threatened by the main antagonist, Owen Davian, being played by the late, good old legendary Philip Seymour Hoffman. And, well, what can you say about Philip Seymour Hoffman? He's good in anything, and it really shows in Mission Impossible 3. Oh, he was so good at playing a despicable, psychotic villain. Oh, yeah. But anyway, so he's interrogating Ethan and, threatening him that, well, he's going to, count to 10 and such, pull the trigger on, his wife, yeah. And if we couldn't tell already, yeah, this is obviously gonna take place somewhere very later on to the film. Like, this is our early taste of what we're going to expect very later on the film. Wouldn't you say so? Of course. And the mentioning of the rabbit's foot, and that being the MacGuffin of Mission Impossible 3. I'm sure most of you guys know the whole thing on the MacGuffin, right? It's an important piece, like, that needs to be retrieved and such. This is a very important item. It's like in Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Ark of the Covenant, Star Wars, the Death Star plans, or the holocron, you know what I mean? Just, yeah, the whole thing on the MacGuffin. So yeah, the rabbit's foot being the MacGuffin in the third installment of Mission Impossible. It's a very important item, and Owen is threatening to kill Ethan's beloved wife if Ethan doesn't tell him where the rabbit's foot is. And, I'm not playing around! Tell me where the damn rabbit's foot is! And so on. And Ethan, he's trying to, get Owen not to kill her and just golly, but man, Owen means business, and, well, then at one point, he shoots her, more than likely, but yeah, that's all we get, and then boom, we get straight to the opening title of the film, and with the Mission Impossible theme, and yes. Then, obviously, this takes place very early than what we saw at the start, yeah, because, well, Ethan, by this point, who has technically retired from IMF, not officially, but he's living a happy-go-lucky life with his now new love interest and fiancée, soon-to-be wife, Julia, being played by Michelle Monaghan. And yeah, she's a great actress. I've seen her in a good chunk of other films, like most notably Maxine. Yeah, she was good in that. But more than that, of course. And I know you've seen her in other films, yeah. She was also in that one film with, that's on Apple TV. You know which one I'm talking about, yeah. Anyways, so, yeah, they're having a party at their house in Virginia, and, yeah, I think, yeah, because, like, they had gotten engaged very recently, and, Ethan's life is happy as it should be, and, because, yeah, I'd give the poor guy a break, honestly, because he deserves where he's at right now, does he? Well, at one point, he receives a special phone call from someone at IMF, and having him meet him up at a 7-Eleven. And one of the new characters that we get, and who's a part of the IMF, is Musgrave. Yeah, Musgrave. And Musgrave's first name is because I hate when IMDb sometimes doesn't, like, show the full names of the characters. You know what I mean? Just, it's sometimes stupid. But, yeah, but just overall, yeah, Musgrave, being played by, yeah, John, that's his name, John Musgrave, being played by Billy Crudup, if I'm getting the last name right. I know I've seen him before in a bunch of other films, and he's a good actor too, and he was pretty good, and little do we know on the character of John, what he's really like in the film. I mean, again, because how can you tell when, certain characters, like, you don't know whom to trust, and, like, you know what I'm saying? Just, yeah, anyways, so John informs Ethan and offering him to be a part of this mission to go and rescue another IMF agent, which being Lindsay Ferris, being played by Kerry Russell. And not to mention that Kerry Russell would go on to work with Abrams again, most notably in The Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, you remember who she plays in The Rise of Skywalker, so yes. So apparently Kerry went missing, and obviously, yeah, and it doesn't take too long for us to realize that, yeah, she's been captured. Ethan, even though he knows Ferris very well, he's not sure if he wants to do it. And even telling John that there are better other, agents of IMF that can do the job. But John, yeah, he insists and really wants Ethan to consider, doing this and to help Ferris. And again, because the fact that Ethan knew Ferris very well, because, most notably, he trained Ferris. He was her instructor, and they had a pretty good relationship. And even when it was established later on that, and when Ethan was talking about Ferris, that he viewed Ferris like a sister he never had. Yeah, so now it's not like that, they had a relationship or something. Even when Luther brought up and asked, if they slept or something, but no, of course not. Not in that way, not romantically, okay? He already has a woman in his life. Then, before John disembarks from 7-Eleven, he tells Ethan to take some pictures for him, take pictures at the party for him, pointing to a Kodak camera. And, I think we know where this is going. He buys the Kodak camera, and the Kodak camera is not just a plain, ordinary Kodak camera. It comes specifically from the IMF, and it contains a message for Ethan. And, yeah, John, delivering the message to Ethan on the Kodak camera about Ferris, and that she was assigned to, track Owen Davian. But unfortunately, at a certain point, the IMF lost communications with Ferris, and yeah, obviously, because, she had been captured, and thus, it's up to Ethan, because they really want Ethan to do this, to go and rescue Ferris. And already 3 members of IMF, being assigned with Ethan, team and such. And, well, one of them, of course, being Luther, but also, in addition with Luther, 2 new faces. Yeah. And, of course, the whole thing of this message will self-destruct, and all that happens is that smoke comes out of the Kodak camera. At least it didn't explode on Ethan. Anyways. But, yeah. Then, Ethan, he does become a part of this assignment, the mission to go and rescue Ferris. And, well, that's when, he does inform Julia what he's going to be doing. And the fact is that throughout the film, Julia, she does not know that Ethan is a spy, and he's working for a government agency, which being IMF. This is unbeknownst to her, and it's understandable why she doesn't know, because, to keep her safe, and if she were to know, then, yeah, so. But if it's not obvious, yeah, very later on in the film, she does end up finding out, of course, just, yeah. But anyways, so when Ethan meets up with Luther, reuniting with him once again, well, in addition, 2 new faces that step in. We have Zen, played by Maggie Q, and we also have Declan, played by Jonathan Rhys Meyers. Yeah, so they're the 2 new faces that, have been teamed up alongside with Ethan and Luther, and thus, yeah, all 4 of them going after to find and rescue Ferris. Okay, so, the team, they go to Berlin, where Ferris is located, and when they get there, because, yeah, that whole sequence where they're going through this building and, in order to get to Ferris, disabling some parts of the building and causing some explosions here and there, and with the gadgetries they have, to cause a distraction, and, well, most notably Ethan going in to rescue Ferris. It goes pretty well. They succeed, and with some of the bad guys they shoot down. And not to mention, one of the bad guys, who happens to be one of, Owen's henchmen. And unfortunately, because he got quite wounded, from the explosives that that went off, and yeah, Brownway. There we go. Yeah, Brownway, being played by Eddie Marsan. Yeah, so he's the only one that survived, and again, he's one of Owen's henchmen. So yeah, he survived. And well, yeah, because Ethan and the rest of the team, they succeed, and they rescue Ferris along with two broken computers. Very important for them to get, and what happens later on. But, of course, yeah, they're not getting away that easily, because some of the other remaining bad guys, they come in, and even when they just, the team dispose one vehicle, to explode, a van, and, Declan... He's a chopper pilot, so of course we have to have someone who pilots a copter / a chopper. So yeah, so they get in the chopper, but to make things worse, a chopper from the bad guys is chasing after them. So we get this pretty cool helicopter chase, even when they're going through, to make things more worse, they're going through these giant windmills. And them dodging and avoiding the incoming missiles from the bad guys' chopper. And even when, they miss it, they do pretty good missing those missiles, even causing one or two of the windmills to be damaged and tipped over. And one of the propellers of the windmill broke off, and golly, it almost struck the sheep, a herd of sheep. Jeez Louise, thankfully, none of the sheep got hurt, luckily. But also, to make things even more worse, there's an explosive pallet inside of Ferris's head, and it's burning her head very painful. And they're trying to disable the bomb, and using, charges, because clear, and, a simple way to, stop from the bomb to go off and such. But even after, say, they took down the bad guys in the chopper, because we should have seen it coming, right? That the chopper of the bad guys, it crashed into one of the windmills. So, yeah, that's the end of that chopper. But sadly, Ferris, she meets her demise. It goes off, and she's the way it's, and her eye, oh my gosh, that's horrific. That was pretty sad, and we didn't get that much of Keri Russell in Mission Impossible, but hey, it's just one of those things with some characters, and yeah, Ethan definitely being the most upset towards poor Ferris. Yeah, because like I said earlier, he knew Ferris, he trained her, and for her becoming a full-time agent of the IMF, and like I also said, he viewed her like a sister he never had, yeah. However, I mean, we do get more of Keri Russell in this, just via flashbacks, or even say when, at one point, they play a message that Ferris left for Ethan to see. Yeah, with what she discovers because of Owen Davian, so yeah. Okay, but continuing, and to speed things up some, because when it's all over, even though they did save Ferris, but sadly she got killed because of the explosive pallet. When they make their way back to the U.S. and at, the headquarters of IMF, Ethan, along with John, they're brought in, and, by one of the directors, Theodore Brazel, being played by good old Lawrence Fishburne. Yeah. And Lawrence Fishburne, well, of course, there's no denying, he was a perfect addition to the Mission Impossible franchise. And if I can just point this out, some characters that we would sometimes get once in a Mission Impossible film, most notably, and I'm talking about Anthony Hopkins. The fact that he was only there in the second film, it would have been nice if we got more of him, and golly, could you imagine if we got more of him, or even say, if Lawrence Fishburne's character, Brazel, and Hopkins' character, if they cross paths, and how they would interact as big-time guys at IMF. Oh boy, imagine that. But, yeah. But that's how it was for Hopkins' character in the second installment. That's okay, but again, sometimes you just wonder and wish, would have loved to see more of so-on-so in the franchise. You know what I'm saying? Just, yeah, I'm sure some of you would think so too. But yeah, so, like I said, John and Ethan, they're brought in, and because of what happened, and kind of a bit, disappointed a little bit in Ethan and John, but yeah, just overall, everything's good. However, at one point, Ethan received a letter from the now late Ferris. Apparently, she had this letter planned before she died, and, well, sadly, when she died, the letter came in, and it has a microdot to it, and apparently it contains video footage, as I mentioned, where Ferris left, she left a few messages for Ethan, and explaining to Ethan that it's believed that, and with what she had discovered and found when tracking Davian, that apparently Davian has been in contact with someone in the IMF, Theodore, Lawrence Fishburne's character, Theodore Brazel, and yeah, I mean, Lawrence, I know that even though I've seen this film before, I actually forgot, and because when watching the movie, I was like, oh, so yeah, okay, I mean, it could work, and Lawrence could be good at that, could possibly Theodore be one of the antagonists and working alongside with Davian? Well, we don't know fully quite yet. We only can suspect, and so does Ethan and the others. And not to mention, Ferris gave Ethan some further information on where Davian's going to be next. Well, yeah, I mean, because she technically did, but most notably coming from the two damaged laptops. And whom goes through the two damaged laptops, finding information and on Davian? Enter Benji. Yes, the new addition to the Mission Impossible family / the franchise, being played by good old Simon Pegg. Yes, and yeah, not to mention that it's obvious that Simon Pegg is one of J.J. Abrams' lucky charms. Not to mention another lucky charm of J.J. Abrams being in the third installment, Greg Grunberg. He plays Kevin, a friend at Ethan and Julia's engagement party, because, yeah, some of those that are there at their engagement party, as I mentioned, Kevin, Julia's mother, being played by Jane Daly, Annie, played by Sabra Williams, Ellie, played by Rose Rollins, I think I said that right, and Melissa, played by Sasha Alexander. Yeah, I recognize her, and I know I've seen her from a good chunk of other stuff. And there's also Ashley, played by Tracy Middendorf. I think, I probably said that right. And Rick, played by Aaron Paul. And also, there's Beth, played by Carla Gallo, and Rachel, played by Bellamy Young, and Ken, played by Paul Keeley, and three that go by partygoers. They were played by Catherine Fior, if I'm saying that right, Colleen Crozer, and Sean O'Brien. Okay, so just wanted to name all of those that attend to their engagement party. So So, as I was saying, enter Benji, who, basically, he's the IMF's, Q of the Mission Impossible franchise. Q from James Bond, so view Benji as, being the Q of the Mission Impossible franchise. So he went through the two broken laptops, and what he discovered and where Davian's going to be next is in the Vatican City, I think I mispronounced it just a little, but you know what it is, and in Italy. So, he's going to be there, and he's going to have something in a briefcase, and which being the MacGuffin, the rabbit's foot. And then Benji, he goes on talking about, that has to do with the MacGuffin and this long dialogue and the look on Ethan and Luther's face. They're listening to him very clearly, but just, man, but what Benji said, he was just guessing, okay? Not like he was confirming, but just, So, thus, that's where Ethan has to go next. However, he wants this to be kept secret from those at IMF. Yeah, the directors and so on. Yeah, so, yeah, they're going on a private, top-secret mission that not even the IMF knows about, at least for now. Okay, so then at one point, Ethan, he has a moment with Julia. He wants to speak with Julia at the hospital, because, yeah, forgot to mention that Julia works at a hospital as a nurse. But later on in the franchise, when we would get more of her, she would then become a doctor. So, yeah. But more on that when I get to the other films. Yeah, so anyways. I mean, he, you know, part of him wants to tell Julia what he's really doing. And even when, yeah, he tells her that he will be going away yet again, this time for 2 days. He can't really say. And then, you know, he decides, like, he has Julia, you know, have it be official, like, just both of them get married immediately, and they do so, and they have a little quick honeymoon, making love and such, but yeah. Thus, Ethan, along with Luther, and Zen, and Declan, all of them joining in Ethan, and again, keep in mind that the IMF has not officially have this mission be a go, them going to Italy and the Vatican City, but yeah, they're doing it anyways, so thus they go there in order to bring in Davian and to get the Rabbit's Foot. And yeah, that whole sequence, and yeah, when we come up to where they're at the Vatican City, and through the disguises that they wear, they sneak their way through the Vatican City, a royal palace, which, by the way, the location that we see in Mission Impossible 3, where they go to Italy and the Vatican City, it's the same location where Star Wars Episodes 1 and 2 were shot, of Naboo. Yeah, I mean, tell me you would not immediately recognize that that's Naboo. Yeah, because it didn't take me that long to recognize some familiar locations inside of the Royal Palace, and I was when I was rewatching the movie, I was saying to myself, "Hey, I recognize those areas in that building." And yeah, because again, how can you not? It's thanks to, you know, Episodes 1 and 2, where they shot Naboo, and yeah, especially whenever people go to that actual location, because yeah. Anyways, so yeah, again, them making their way there, and each of them like going through the building, and not to mention that Zen, she was in disguise in a cool orange Jeep and pretending to be a guest at the party, while Luther, he's scuba diving. Not Musgrave, Declan, he's going through various disguises like a security guard or, you know, someone else. And Ethan, you know, he's making his way underground, and when he finally makes his way to his destination, even when he first meets up with Declan, and then when everybody else comes together. And again, their attempt to capture Davian by, well, first off, make a disguise. Because, you know, as we've seen this before, those masks, oh yeah, of course we get that once again. And it's amazing, because we see the behind the scenes of them making the mask, you know, because with the pictures that Zen takes, like using a tiny mirror, like, you know, her makeup, there's a camera. It takes Davian's pictures. Nice. And then it's transferred to the computers that Luther has, and by scanning the face of Davian and thus making a mold / a mask that resembles Davian, implying the eyebrows, and, well, thus Ethan putting on the mask. And that was great visuals and transition, because the camera, like, you know, turning, and when, yeah, Luther's in the way, but then when we see Ethan putting on the mask, like, yeah, going from Tom Cruise to Philip Seymour Hoffman, it's amazing. It really is. No doubt about it. And the disguise that Ethan has as Davian is not complete. Sure, I mean, got the mask and everything, but they've got to obtain his voice. Yeah, like a recording of his voice. So, yeah, a device that's on Ethan's neck, he can speak as Davian. So, when at one point, Davian is ambushed in a bathroom after, say, at one point, Zen playing a character and accidentally spilling a drink on Davian, and Davian making his way to the bathroom to clean it up, well, that's when Declan and Ethan, they step in, most notably Ethan, interrogating Davian and, you know, ordering Davian to read some words on a card, so that way the computer can pick up Davian's voice, and thus it can be transmitted to the device that Ethan has, so he can speak as Davian. And it's almost, things are almost about to get risky when one of Davian's bodyguards is making his way to the bathroom, and yeah, Davian's bodyguard, being played by Jeff Chase, he's making his way to the bathroom, and the cover is almost about to be blown, but just in time, and when Declan steps in, dragging Davian's unconscious body out of sight, and, you know, Ethan, disguised as Davian, playing along, like, you know, trying to clean up. In fact, he did pour something to, yeah, and then trying to clean it up, and he's unable to talk yet because it's not been fully processed, the recordings of Davian, but thankfully, just in time, when it's all done, it's at 100%, and yeah, now Ethan's speaking like Davian. So, yeah, everything's good now. So, now they've captured Davian, and also have obtained the Rabbit's Foot. And they make it out of there quite good, in fact, because, yeah, Ethan catching up to Zen, and Zen in character offering Davian a ride, and yes, and Davian's bodyguard and translator, Davian's translator, as she's credited, played by Bara Sumek. I hope I said her full name right, but again, you know me sometimes, if I did butcher her full name. Yeah, so they make their way to the orange car, but they make their way through a sewer system, yeah, and, well, implanting a bomb underneath the car, and Zen was starting to like the car, but it had to be done, and thus, boom, it explodes. The mission has been accomplished. What seemed impossible was not in the end, and thus, yeah, all of them riding on a boat and the Mission Impossible theme plays, yes, they have succeeded, and thus they're on a plane and they're making their way back to the US, and when Davian does wake up, well, Ethan trying to get Davian to answer their questions on the whole thing of the Rabbit's Foot, but Davian getting right to the point that he will find his wife, his love, and so on, and even asking for his name, and yeah, Ethan's not getting anything out of Davian. Not until, and when, yeah, Davian triggers him by the mention of his love and such, like, yeah. However, Davian, figured that out, well, he's a villain, so yeah. After Davian triggered Ethan, and because Ethan's not having any luck getting him to talk, well, he opens a hatch in the plane and threatening to, you know, release him out of the plane because, yeah, he's tied up and he will cut the strings if he doesn't, you know, answer Ethan on the Rabbit's Foot, and this is out of Ethan's character, and even, yeah, Luther telling Ethan that this is not him, and he shouldn't be doing this, he's got to stop. You know, this isn't him, this isn't typical Ethan. And thankfully, and should have seen it coming, of course, he doesn't. He spares Davian, even though a very good chance that, yes, more than likely, which does happen, yeah, Davian will end up finding and capturing Ethan's now wife, so yeah. So when they arrive back to the US and Davian being transported, yeah, obviously back to IMF, well, another, like, yeah, video message that they watch, and because of the microdot from Ferris, and yeah, and a description of the microdot, because, yeah, because it was hit, yeah, like I said, it was hidden in a stamp from a postcard, a letter that she sent to Ethan. Yeah, and the microdot, yeah, contains information likely critical to the plot. Yeah, that Ethan and Luther choose to keep secret. And this device is small, etc., but yeah, so when looking at it, well, yeah, that's when they do discover that presumably Lawrence Fishburne's character has been interacting and teaming up with Davian, and yeah, right after they're listening to that, and with what Ferris says on that microdot, an explosion happens. Boom, and yeah, an ambush, and yeah, because that sequence on the bridge, and when, yeah, Luther, Ethan, the vehicle that they were in was tipped over, but thankfully they didn't get injured critically. And even say Zen and Dunkley, they're right there, and you know Declan. Sorry, yeah, my bad. Declan. You know, they take action, and yeah, because they're being ambushed, and well, you know. And if it's not obvious what's really happening, yeah, Davian being recruited, and yeah, Davian escaping, and Ethan, Luther, and Zen and Declan, like, them taking on the bad guys, and in the choppers, just, yeah. But overall, they lost Davian. And yeah, because knew this was coming, of course, then Ethan, now being worried / concerned for Julia, you know, and forgot to mention that Luther brought up to Ethan on, you know, a bad idea on being in a relationship and having been engaged, and then, yeah, Ethan telling Luther that, you know, he and Julia got married, just, yeah, I mean, you know, sadly for Ethan, because he knew, of course, the consequences, the circumstances, and, you know, having been in a relationship, and yeah, it just happened, and it is happening, because he's having trouble trying to get in contact with Julia, but she's doing okay so far. She is present at the hospital working, but, yeah, he's unable to get in contact with her, and even up until when someone steps in the hospital, which he's credited as Julia's kidnapper. He's a British guy, and being credited as Julia's kidnapper, being played by Michael Berry Jr. He's in disguise as, yeah, I think like a cop or something, and asking Julia to look at a patient case, you know, a case on a patient, but then puts something on her that conks her out. Yeah, now she's been captured, and even when he has Julia's body on a roller and being covered by a white sheet, and Ethan passed by them. He had no idea. Had he known, and and because he cannot find Julia anywhere, and when, yeah, he then receives a phone call from Davian that he's got, like, I think, yeah, 48 hours, and, you know, when 48, because he's got 48 hours for him to find the rabbit's foot. But if he doesn't, and when 48 hours are up, she's dead. Yeah. But to make things even worse, still, like, you know, it never fails in Mission Impossible. The IMF arrive, and they're going to bring in Ethan, you know, arrest him and such. Like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, Ethan can't catch a break when, like, say, he's sometimes been framed, you know? And thus, you know, he tries to escape from the IMF, but unfortunately, they got him, and thus, he's brought in, and when, you know, Lawrence Fishburne, yeah, his character, Brazel, you know, has some things to say to him and the situation that's happening, but after he leaves the room, Musgrave is the only one that stays in the room where, yeah, Ethan was tied up, and doing mouth-to-mouth, like, yeah, he doesn't talk because he keeps things quiet because they're hearing this from another room. He gives some information to Ethan on where to locate and find / rescue Julia, and, well, where Davian is this time. And yeah, just mouthing what he's saying, and we see subtitles, that he has to go to Shanghai. That's where Julia and Davian are, and where the rabbit's foot. The rabbit's foot is also in Shanghai, and the specific location that Ethan has to go to in order to get the rabbit's foot and bring it to Davian. So, yeah, so nice on Musgrave's part helping out Ethan. I mean, you know, we don't suspect anything from Musgrave, do we? Mainly, we think it's Theodore. But, yeah, but as the film proceeds... But I think you know by now, but still. Okay, but anyways, and still to speed things up some, yeah, again, Musgrave, I know I might be kind of mispronouncing his last name, but, you know, still, bear with me. helping out Ethan, even lending him like a knife and such. And when at one point he's being transferred to another part of the building, now the opportunity comes to use it on some of the IMF agents in the elevator. And yeah, he gets out and making his way through the building, and even when he's using a radio transmitter and pretending to speak as Musgrave with that device, just yeah, and he disposes the radio when he goes through another building, and he places it to a radio, and it's playing "We Are Family." Oh, it's funny, and yeah, to Brazel's annoyance, but yeah, overall, Ethan succeeds on escaping, and thus, in disguise, and making his way, taking a plane to Shanghai in order to find the Rabbit's Foot and to save the woman of his dreams, the love of his life. Sorry, yeah, Julia. And thankfully, after he arrived to Shanghai and in an apartment building he was hiding in, well, just so happens that Luther, Declan, and Zen, they're helping him as well, because, yeah, they were informed about Julia's kidnapping, and yeah, thus they're here to help. Very risky, but they're in. They're here to help Ethan. And even when Ethan gives them the details on where the Rabbit's Foot is and the tall buildings, and he's going to, do some zip lining and make a jump, but those kind of buildings and the fact that the rooftops have glass, glass windows on top, impossible. Yeah. But, Ethan's still gonna do it, and like I said, they're there for him, they're in. So thus, them making their way, each of them in different vans, Declan and Zen, they're in one van while Luther is in a van of his own, and while Ethan, he's on top of one of the buildings, and, well, at one point, Zen and Declan, they are shooting from, a gun, baseballs, to distract the guards on top of the buildings, and it works, and thus, Ethan, making a jump for it, he cracked one of those windows, but he managed to succeed on jumping and thus making his way into the building. We don't cut to where Ethan is inside the building and when he collects the Rabbit's Foot. Because, yeah, we get, more of Declan and Zen and Luther. Most notably Declan and Zen. And she's speaking in her language, something that she explains to Declan, something that she said as a kid for her cat to come back, what she specifically says. And Declan asked Zen if, he can be taught how to speak that, And I don't know, is it me? Or was Declan, I guess, taking a liking at Zen? Personally, I mean, I don't care, and I think, hey, if that's what the movie was going for, kind of, but yeah, it would have been nice, yeah. I mean, they seem like a perfect match. Wouldn't you think so? Just, yeah, anyways. That kind of stuff in some movies where, it looks like that so-and-so is pursuing a relationship with so-and-so, kind of. Yeah, but just, it seemed nice, but anyways, the movie doesn't go into full detail on them, and if they did pursue a relationship, because, yeah, that's interrupted when, yeah, Ethan, although he succeeded on capturing the Rabbit's Foot, yeah, he's in a bit of a troubled situation. And when he jumps out of the building, breaking more glass, this time, he breaks glass this time and, igniting a parachute, yeah, not from a good, he's not high enough, and just, yeah. And all of them catching up to Ethan, but, when the parachute gets caught and he breaks into another building, and then, yeah, and to make things more worse, when the parachute, because of the wind, the wind blows the parachute, and then he finds his way in the middle of traffic. He at one point loses the Rabbit's Foot, but he catches it, thankfully, and, well, the security guards from that building that were holding the Rabbit's Foot, they're on Ethan's tail, and thankfully Declan and Zen, they showed up, and now he's in the van they're in, and yeah, a chase through Shanghai where they're chasing after them, and from Zen and Ethan whipping out their guns. Zen at one point gets injured, but thankfully she did survive. She did recover from that, just to get that out of the way. Because, you know, these characters in Mission Impossible, we start to like them, the sidekicks, and whom are a part of Ethan and Luther's team, right? Just, yeah. And Declan and Zen, they were pretty good characters in the third installment. Yeah. It never fails, you know, members that we would see once in a Mission Impossible film, you know, joining Luther and Ethan, they're always good, yeah. But up until, say, when Benji joined in, and then later on Rebecca Ferguson. But until we get there, just, yeah, anyways. And that also goes for Jeremy Renner. But until we get there, okay, anyways. So, back to where I was, because, yeah. Aftermath, they succeeded escaping from the security guards, etc. And then they meet up with Luther, and now Ethan's got to do this on his own. And having Luther, Declan, and Zen make their way back to the U.S. And, you know, there's a good chance that, yeah, they will be interrogated. Like, yeah, they, you know, the IMF will be there to greet them. Luther, Declan, and Zen, yeah. And even Ethan, he, you know, if he is to die alongside with Julia, then this will be the last time that his team sees him. But I think we all know that that's not to happen, right? So, thankfully, and before the 5 seconds was up, only had 5 seconds, and when Ethan called Davian once again, yeah. Even when at one point through that chase sequence, like, no good signal, but eventually, yeah, able to get signal and calling up Davian, and told him that he got the rabbit's foot. And thus Davian telling him where to meet him at this train yard in Shanghai, of course. So, yeah, so again, Ethan has to do this on his own, saying goodbye to his team for now, and thus, yeah, Ethan proceeding on to the exact location that Davian told him to meet him. So when Ethan, making his way to the location, well, finding himself getting in a limo, and we see Julia's kidnapper, as he's credited, and telling Ethan to drink, no questions, that's all he says, and apparently, yeah, the liquid in the cup is, yeah, and should have seen it coming, yeah, tranquilizing him, and when Ethan wakes up, and having a bit of, like a life flash, seeing him and Julia, well, yeah, he wakes up and finds himself tied up, and, you know, in front of him, face to face, also tied up, and with tape around her mouth, is Julia. And yeah, this is where the film started off, where we saw Ethan tied up, and we saw Davian, his wife, tied up, and such, just, yeah. And also, we do see, and as I mentioned, Luther, Zen, and Declan, when they arrive, the IMF are there to greet them, and yeah, you have a lot of explaining to do, yeah, says Theodore. And yeah, cutting back to Ethan, well, you know, he brought the rabbit's foot, but apparently it was a fake, and Ethan, and I know we too, the audience, are confused, like, he got the rabbit's foot! Well, apparently it's a fake, and, you know, Davian is wanting Ethan to tell him where the rabbit's foot is, or he will shoot his wife. And, you know, Ethan's trying to talk it out with Davian, like, you know, like, trying to get Davian to listen to him, and, you know, they can talk it out man to man and so on, just, yeah, but sadly, and when Ethan, he's trying his best to talk with Davian and the whole situation on where the rabbit's foot is, which he doesn't know of. He doesn't know where it is when he thought he got it, but apparently it wasn't the rabbit's foot. Davian shoots Julia. And then, it's a bit quiet, and when Davian is exiting the room, well, enter Musgrave. Yes, he steps in, and it turns out he was the one that was in contact with Davian, not Theodore, Lawrence Fishburne's character. Yeah. So that's nice to see that, you know, Theodore Brazel, you know, he was not a bad guy. It was really Musgrave. And how did we not see this coming? That, you know, Yet another traitor from IMF who turns out to be a bad guy, and who's been interacting with Davian. And, Musgrave informs Ethan that it's not Julia, and by tearing off a bit of the mask that resembles Julia, it's Davian's translator. Ooh, yeah, that's interesting, and what a twist. And thankfully, Julia's okay, at least for now. Obviously, she's still being held hostage, but still. Well, because, why? It's Davian's translator that, was wearing a mask that resembles Julia, because, well, Davian's translator failed him back at the palace, in Italy. Understandable, But it's not like, she didn't know, but, that kind of villain Davian is, not forgiving a sidekick or henchman, someone that works for him, forgiving he or she, anyways. And thankfully Musgrave, good on his part, technically, because he took a lot of convincing, for Davian not to actually kill Julia. However, almost forgot to mention that by this point, Ethan does have an explosive pellet planted inside him, so, oh boy. But I think, thankfully, Julia doesn't have one in her. So, it's mainly Ethan. So, well, great, because, first Ferris and now Ethan. Great. That makes things even far more worse. Okay, and also apparently they used, Davian's translator pretending to be Julia, and to make sure, if Ethan did get the actual rabbit's foot, which he did, and and then when Ethan, is asking John Musgrave, where Julia is and if she's alive, he wants to speak to her, and well, John does allow Ethan to speak to her a little, and by ringing up the phone and having Ethan speak to Julia, and Julia still has no idea what's going on, still not knowing that her now husband is a secret spy and so on. She still has no idea and why she's been captured. And then Ethan biting John's hand, knocking him out, stealing a knife, untying himself from the chair, and thus making his way in this little village to find and locate Julia. And also, I want to mention this and bring this up, because with the action sequences and, the cinematography, and if you know J.J. Abrams so well and how he does his cinematography, oh yeah, and the action sequences and such, I think this is a biggie for Abrams in his movies where, some characters, not all the time, but just, sometimes they do a lot of running. And because, there's one cool long shot where Ethan's running, and, it's just really cool. And with it being accompanied with Giacchino's music and score, just fantastic, eventually, and to speed things up, because, Ethan does end up finding Julia, and, of course, now is the opportunity for, him to tell her what's going on and such, but, even before that, Davian starts to activate the bomb that's inside him, and when helping Julia be untied, and telling her how to use a specific gun, and giving her all the details on the gun, and, she's like, how do you know all this? And, telling her that he's got to be killed in order for the bomb to be, discharged and such. But also the fact that, Davian showing up. Davian showing up, and, because, a fight between Davian and Ethan, and still, with the bomb inside him, burning his head, it's hurting. Ethan is at one point losing to Davian, fighting and such. But thankfully, the hope gets back into him where, he's he uses his elbows and so on to really kick the shit out of Davian. Pardon my French, but it's true. But just overall, in the end, Davian is defeated, and even when they roll outside of the building that they're in, and a vehicle coming in and collides with Davian, just, yeah, right in the face, and yeah, Davian, he's done for. That's the end of Owen Davian right there. All that remains is a shoe of his. But, yeah. So after that, well, yeah, Ethan helping out Julia, and like I said, with the gun and telling her that he has to be killed briefly and, you know, to disfuse the bomb, and telling her that if any threat comes in, she has to use the gun, which she does so, even when, like, you know, there's like a reflection that she sees and can see the bad guy coming in and, yeah, taking down that one bad guy. But then, when, say, John steps in, she shoots him. Good on her. And right there, she became a hero, defeating and killing the second antagonist. Yeah, and just so happens that John, he was carrying the rabbit's foot. Yep, so now the rabbit's foot is in their hands and no longer in the hands of the bad guys. Yep, and Julia not giving up on Ethan, like trying her best to, you know, give him reception, you know, because, you know, and, you know, mouth to mouth, and thankfully she succeeds. He comes back to life, and yeah, it's all good now. And thus, yeah, they have a little vacation, like roaming around Shanghai, and Ethan finally tells Julia that he's an agent. He works for IMF, short for Impossible Mission Force, and she finds that silly, but, you know, thankfully, you know, Ethan, he found the right one for him because, yeah, you know, she won't say anything. His secret is safe with her. Nice. Yeah, that's great to see. And thus, we come to the aftermath / the epilogue. Everything's back to normal, better than ever, and, well, Theodore congratulating Ethan, you know, because the mission has been accomplished, and also the fact that, you know, with him being married, and now he can proceed, he and Julia can proceed with their honeymoon. And, you know, Ethan, well, he's not sure if he's gonna come back officially, just, yeah, being a full-time agent once again, but possibly, yeah. And if he does so, and even when Ethan asks Theodore what the Rabbit's Foot really is, if he considers coming back full-time, then Theodore will tell him. Yeah. And also, a nice moment where we see Julia interacting with Ethan's fellow team members, and seems as though that, yeah, because Julia, she's now become a part of the IMF, and that's great to see. Everybody from Ethan's team, Theodore, and everybody else in IMF, they, you know, cheer and applaud Ethan and Julia, and, you know, congratulating them on their marriage, and, you know, have fun on their honeymoon, and, you know, definitely Luther just like, woo! Yeah. But that was a great way to end off the third installment. Yeah, you know, because it ended off on a high note, and not to mention that, the third installment would be, the last one we would see for now, because basically, yeah, after the third installment came out, the Mission Impossible franchise took quite a long break. I mean, yeah, because there was no doubt that, you know, the franchise was going to come back, but it needed a break, and thus, yeah, that's what happened. And, well, we would have to wait a couple of years until we would get the fourth installment, and we know what that is. Yeah. But, yeah, the third Mission Impossible film, simply titled Mission Impossible 3. It's a really good installment in the Mission Impossible franchise. For this being the third installment, this being J.J. Abrams' first movie that he has directed, it was no disappointment for this being his directorial debut. Just, yeah, he nailed it. And look what he would do next after doing Mission Impossible, Star Trek, Star Wars, Super 8, just, yeah, and doing more work on television, of course. Not to mention that, yeah, 2 years after the third Mission Impossible film, he would do another pretty good TV show, Fringe. Yeah, that one. Yeah, you know what it is, yeah. Yeah, and I know I got the title right, but yeah, just yeah, again, Mission Impossible 3, it's an excellent film in the Mission Impossible franchise. Everything from beginning to end, the storyline, the plot, the MacGuffin, which being the rabbit's foot, the characters, and, you know, from familiar faces that come back, most notably Ethan and Luther, new faces that step in, new bad guys, you know, from Philip Seymour Hoffman, Billy Crudup, Michelle Mangana, you know, Jonathan Rhys Meyers, Kerry Russell, Maggie Q, Simon Pegg, Eddie Marson, Lawrence Fishburne, Bahar Sumek, Jeff Chase, everybody. Just, yeah, they were all fantastic. J.J. Abrams' direction, and with the writing from Kurtzman and Orsi, Giacchino's music and score, the action sequences, the fights, the suspense, you know, great moments that came from the third film, you know, and with great dialogue and moments where we were up at the edge of our seats, just, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next? And like, overall, Mission Impossible 3, an excellent Mission Impossible film, a masterpiece in the franchise. Wouldn't you say so? Just, yeah. And I'm giving Mission Impossible 3, well, what the heck, 10 out of 10 stars. Yes, 10 out of 10 stars for Mission Impossible 3. And what about you guys? What did you think of the third installment in the Mission Impossible franchise itself, Mission Impossible 3? Is it one of your top favorite films in the Mission Impossible franchise? You know, did any of you, by any chance, get to see this in theaters? Were you familiar with Abrams, Kurtzman, and Orsi before they did the third Mission Impossible film? And what were some of your favorite moments, and moments where you were like, oh my gosh, just, you know, just, yeah, your favorite action sequences and, you know, the characters, just, yeah, what more do I have to say? Just overall, what do you think of Mission Impossible 3 itself? And with what I've had to say, my review, and yeah, what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of the third installment of the Mission Impossible franchise. Again, simply titled Mission Impossible 3. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward. And I will see you guys in the next video / review. And, well, of course, continuing on with the Mission Impossible review marathon, stay tuned because, well, you know what's next. The fourth installment, which would be directed by the same dude who brought us, say, The Iron Giant and The Incredibles, and the fourth Mission Impossible film, marking his first ever live-action film he directed. Yeah, you know by now. Just, yeah, so, yeah. Again, stay tuned for my review of the fourth installment of the Mission Impossible franchise, Ghost Protocol. Take care, and peace out.